Okay, this is section 6.1, Composite Functions. You were handed a study guide in class, so I would use that to guide your notes, and I will follow the study guide throughout the video. So, the title again is Composite Functions, and just to start with the general definition, as stated on your study guide, it says given two functions, f of x and g of x, the composite function, which is denoted f of g of x, just like that, is defined as, this is f of g of x. And that's exactly how it's read, f of g of x. So now the domain of f of g is the set of all numbers x in the domain of g such that g of x is in the domain of f. So that sounds kind of complicated, but it really isn't. Let's take a look at a picture. Remember when we first started talking about functions and we kind of looked at this mapping? Well, let's look at this first function we're going to call g, and the second mapping we're going to call f. So this is the domain of g, so this would be the range of g, and then this would be the domain of f, and the range of f. Alright, so let's read that again. The domain of f of g, so f of g is actually going to take elements from g, from the domain of g, and map them to the range of f. So in order for that to happen, the domain of f of g is the set of all numbers x in the domain of g such that g of x is in the domain of f. So that means all of the elements in g that get mapped to the intersection here between the range of g of x and the domain of f, because then those elements will get applied f and end up in the range of f. Alright, so let's take a look at an example. The first example on your study guide says find f of g of 2 and g of f of 2, and we're told that f of x is equal to x squared and g of x is equal to x plus 1. Okay, so f of g of 2, you could see this written a couple different ways. You could be asked to find f of g of 2 like this, and then more explicitly that means f of g of 2. And I think this way tells you more, because all that this means is that I'm going to find f of whatever g of 2 equals. So the first thing I need to do is get a value for g of 2. So what is g of 2? Okay, so that means I replace x with 2 in the g function. So here's my g function. So if I replace x with 2, that's 2 plus 1. So g of 2 is equal to 3. So now, instead of looking at this as f of g of 2, I'm going to find f of, we know that g of 2 is equal to 3. So now, how do I find f of 3? Well, I go to the f function and I replace x with 3. So f of 3 is 3 squared, or 9. So, to answer the question, f of g of 2 is equal to 9. Let's try g of f of 2. So g, again, this could be written like this. So I don't want that to throw you if you see a different notation. But again, that means g of f of 2. And again, this tells you so much more, because now I can see, okay, I need to find a value for f of 2, and then I'll find g of that value. So what is f of 2? Let's see, f of x is x squared, so this means I will replace x with 2 in the f function. 2 squared is 4. So now I just need to find g of, I know f of 2 is 4, so I'm looking for g of 4. So I go to the g function and I replace x with 4. So g of 4 is equal to 5. So g of f of 2 is equal to 5. Okay, let's try the next example. The next example says find f of g of x and g of f of x, and then we're given two definitions. We're told that f of x is equal to x to the 1/2 and g of x is equal to x plus 1. Okay, so in the above example, we were asked to find the composite function of a specific value. This question is just asking us to find the function in terms of x, but you go about it exactly the same way. So let's start with the f of g of x. Again, the first thing you want to do is rewrite it in this notation. So this means f of g of x. So that means that I go to the f function and I replace x with g of x. So what is g of x? X plus 1. So this is the same as f of, let's go ahead and replace g of x with what it is, x plus 1. Okay, so now this looks like something we did in previous sections. F of x plus 1 means I go to the f function and I replace x with x plus 1. So this will be, in place of x, x plus 1, and then that's to the 1/2 power. So f of g of x is x plus 1 to the 1/2. If I go the other way and find g of f, so again, let's first change that to g of f of x. Secondly, let's replace f of x with what it is, and it's x to the 1/2. So this is g of x to the 1/2, and that tells me that I go to the g function and I replace x with x to the 1/2. So g of f of x is x to the 1/2 plus 1. Okay, next page of the study guide. Says find a similar problem. Find f of g of x and g of f of x when f of x is given as 2x and g of x is given as 0.5x. Okay, why don't you take a second and try this one yourself. Okay, moving on. The next example says write h of x, which is x plus 1 cubed, as the composition of functions. So now we're going to do the opposite. I'm given a composite function, and I need to come up with the two functions that make up that composite functions. So I want to come up with an f of x and a g of x, so when I compose them, I will come up with x plus 1 cubed. Well, since I have a function cubed, let's go ahead and call f of x x cubed, and since the function I'm going to cube is x plus 1, let's go ahead and call that a different function, and I'll choose g. So now let's check ourselves and see if this is going to work right. So if I want to find f of g, what will that be? So that's f of g of x. So this would be f of g of x is x plus 1. So f of x is x cubed, so this would be x plus 1 cubed. Ta-da! That's exactly what I wanted. So I think the best strategy here is to try to look at the makeup of the given function. And in general, I think you will see functions like this, where you have something to a power, or you could see the square root taken of a particular function, and you just need to kind of decompose that and maybe play around with a couple of different functions to try to come up with that right composition. Okay, moving on to the next example. You see a chart, and it says to fill in the table. So let's get this started, and then I'll see if maybe you can finish this on your own. But let me try to explain to you what we need to think about when we look at something like this. So we're given values for x, we're told what f of that specific value is, and we're also told what g of that specific value is. And then you're asked to fill out the table where we're looking for f of g of x and g of f of x. So for example, with this first one, we're looking for f of g of x when x is 0, f of x is 1, and g of x is 6. Well, I would approach this the same way we approached the others. What is g of x? Well, g of x is 6. So really, all I'm looking for is f of, let's replace g of x with what it equals. I'm looking for f of 6. Well, I can tell f of 6 if I go down in the f function when x equals 6. So here's x equals 6, so f of 6 is 0. So in this case, f of g of x is equal to 0. Let's try the next one. We're looking for, again, f of g of x, but this time when x is 1, f of x is 2, and g of x is 5. So what is f of g of x? Well, we're looking for f of g of x. In this case, g of x is 5. So really the question is, what is f of 5? So I'll go down to x equals 5 and go to the f of x column. So when x is 5, f of x is 6. So f of 5 is equal to 6. Let's try a couple in the g column. So this is asking me to find g of f of x. Well, what is f of x? So I go back here because I'm working within this row. So I'm looking for f of x when x is equal to 0. So f of x is equal to 1. So really I'm looking for g of 1. Well, how do I find g of 1? Well, I have to go to where x is 1 and look at the g of x function. So this tells me right here that g of 1 is 5. So let's go down to the next one. So now I'm looking for, again, g of f of x. Well, what is f of x? F of x is 2. So really, I'm looking for g of 2. So I go to where x equals 2, and I look for the value at the g function. So g of 2 is 4. So why don't you see if you can't complete this table, and again, this is something we can take a closer look at also in class. Okay, one more example that I'd like to take a look at, because you'll see something like this in the MyLabs Plus. And again, it kind of has you think about what this means when given a chart. So here we're going to look at x, f of x, and g of x.